No, how come? I think you need to move over. Normally we're
I'm sitting
no,
where I normally sit.
no,
Good,
but
split
we're
this
not.
way.
I don't normally put the chairs on an angle. That's why. Yeah, because I haven't got the thing any different. It is where it is. That is where it always is. You want to talk first? Hi guys. Um, welcome to another episode of Live Coffee Time with
Me and you.
Kevin and Melissa. We decided to talk about how the language you use impacts how you show up, impacts your progress, yada yada.
The inner meanie.
So we're going to talk about that today while everybody's piling in. I know we were working out and Kevin said, "Oh, we have the same color on." Hi, Mindy. So when you're there, say hello. If you don't watch us live and you watch the replay, let us know you watch the replay. The 6-week program started orientation this week, so I won't be intaking any more or enrolling any more clients into any program until early October for a November start. You must be walking, Diana, while we are chatting. I love the trails in the Red Deer area, so enjoy. Anyway, so yeah, the next enrollment will be in early October for a November start. I usually like to start the last 6 week of the year. I like to start it in early November, so it'll start whatever Monday that is. Actually, I think Monday is Halloween, so it'll start orientation on Halloween, and then full program the week Monday after that. Hey Tracy. What else do we have for news? Oh, I did a lot of work today on my vacation book. I just posted a picture of the cover, but besides the cover, I actually did more work on it today. So I'm actually also working on behind the scenes right now, which I've had in my head for a long time, and I've just not had the time to sit down and actually put it together, or maybe in some ways I've been avoiding sitting down and put it together. And we're calling it the the Fit Girls Rock Ultimate Vacation Survival Guide.
Right.
So it'll be tips on how to navigate vacation and still maintain your healthy lifestyle. Tips to navigate kind of finding a balance as opposed to going all in on one side of it where you're too obsessive and too restrictive and all out on the other side of it. So that's coming. Any of my clients in my Badass Tribe will get that for free once it's done. Outside of that, it will be for sale on the website. Oh, and which also should talk about, our revamped website went live today. I will actually post it here in the community probably tomorrow. I went live today, and I don't know, there's probably not many of you who've seen what the old version looked like, maybe a few of you. The old version was very much not me. It was very blah, I would call it.
Well, that and all the pictures were
and the
not
colors
that hair.
And the pictures weren't my hair and everything. So it's completely revamped, completely new branded colors, the purple, the bright purple, the bright pink, the bright yellow, everything that is our brand. And then there's all the pictures of myself with this hair and me and Kevin together, and explanations of who we are, what we do, explanations of both of the 3 ways you can find us. So the free Facebook community here, and then the 6-week Bold and Badass project, and then what the Badass Tribe is and how to get involved in that one. And then the About Us, I think that's about it.
Did you mention about gold?
Yeah, I mentioned it. I put it in the group. Yeah, so yeah, they already know we won gold.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Tracy. It does look good. I'm really happy with it. We're both happy with it. Okay, so we're today going to talk about, as you pile in and you're listening to us or whatever, feel free to let us know who you are, where you're from if you want, or what you're doing or whatever. And if when we're talking you have any questions or any comments or any feedback or whatever, feel free to post it in the comments. We'll either go back to the questions after or address them as they come in. So the reason why we kind of chose to talk about this topic today is I've been having a few conversations with some of my longer term clients who are kind of, I feel like, almost in a stuck phase, or I've been talking to people who talk about being stuck. And most often what I see when people are stuck is not actually always that they're not performing the things that they need to do when they do them. It's that they get so caught up in their own head that they lose consistency because the scale's not moving, or this is just who I am, or this is so hard, or I can't do this, or I'll try, or what's some other good ones?
Well, the other thing to point out too, though, is like this is not what we're going to talk about today. Isn't necessarily somebody who's stuck in the middle of their journey. That's not the only category.
No.
Like there's people who are in a long-term
Hey, Susanna.
diet roller coaster journey that would have the same.
Oh, absolutely. I was
go
just
through
saying.
the same emotions. No, I'm just
Yeah.
adding my 2 cents.
No, I know. I was just saying that that's the reason why we chose to talk about it today.
Yeah.
Is because people do have a tendency to use certain language that keeps them stuck, and they don't realize that that's the reason why they are stuck.
Yep.
And
shitty language stops you from doing it in the first place too.
And shitty language can stop you from starting it at all.
Yep.
So shitty language can stop you from starting it, period. It can stop you in your tracks when you're already started because certain things can interrupt your flow and you're not prepared, or your expectations aren't managed well enough to go, oh, but this is life and how am I going to navigate it, and can I look at the controllable as opposed to going down the rabbit hole of stuff that I can't control. And then shitty language can also
keep you
down there as if you don't learn how to navigate it and pull yourself back up.
Right.
So that's basically the gist of what we wanted to talk about today and why we want to talk about it. And honestly, from my perspective, I've coached thousands of women at this point. And one of the things that I know for a fact is that we automatically presume that it's nutrition or it's movement that's holding us back, or that are the full keys to success. And the truth of the matter is that it will always be mindset that's holding you back. It will always be, whether that's, internal language can involve many things. It can involve your self-limiting beliefs. It can involve the fact that you're stuck in a more of a fixed mindset than a growth mindset. It can be involved in self-sabotage. It can be just the way you talk to yourself. Instead of reframing the language that goes on in your head, you simply kind of just let it go, or have adapted and are comfortable with that language even if you don't like it. And then it's also understanding that your brain works in certain ways whereby its main goal is to keep you comfortable and within the familiar. And even if the things that go on in your head or in your thought processes don't serve you or aren't serving you, that doesn't mean that your brain won't still gravitate to there, because that's the comfort it's always known.
Right.
So to be able to overcome those, you need to create new comforts from your uncomfortable.
Right.
So you need to lean into your discomfort in order to make this current discomfort your new comfort zone, so that your brain automatically gravitates to that.
Right. And that's 100%, because when you start getting out of your comfort zone, you tend to, as soon as if you find it tough, you don't succeed, you're struggling with it, then the first thing that people tend to do is go back to that negative language. Oh, I can't do this, or it's too hard, or right. I knew this wasn't for me, or what have you. And if you're not able to, like you say, challenge yourself, go through it, and navigate why is it hard, navigate what is causing you to be negative, then you're stuck with that.
Or if you're not able to, exactly. And if you're not able to, by navigating it, what? Don't want that done? No. By navigating it, that also means reframing it.
Leaning pose.
That also means reframing it. So when you're experiencing negative emotions or negative language or negative thoughts in your head, you have to have the conscious awareness to think to yourself, is this serving me? Can I change this? how could I reframe it? And that doesn't always mean that you're happy and positive and bubbly. Nobody is always happy, positive, and bubbly, but it means that you take it from something that's likely going to cause you to go down a rabbit hole into self-hate and self-destruction, into something that doesn't have to be, this hug yourself moment, but it can pull you up a little bit more simply by saying, this doesn't serve me, I need to stop this. It might even be enough. And then you start to reframe things or move on from it, or I don't know, jump over the hoop. But these are the things that keep us stuck. It's the way that we talk to ourselves and the way that we handle ourselves when we specifically come upon a perceived failure or a fumble or a struggle or a bump. We somehow have this preconceived notion that when we start a goal, it's going to be linear and it's going to just flow along steadily, and it's never going to have ups and downs or bumps and struggles and bruises. And I don't know why we think that, because ultimately there's not a thing in life that runs that way. So why we're able to convince ourselves that this would run differently, I have no idea. But we are. I've been there too. Kevin's been there too. Most likely anybody who's watching or listening will have been there too, where we presume that things will just run this way and the scale will continue downward on the downward trend, and, progress will happen, and I'll be able to flip the switch, and I'll talk better to myself, and I'll show up for my nutrition, and I'll be consistent, and there'll be, it'll just run hunky-dory. And it doesn't work that way.
Right. I think one of the reasons that it doesn't is because in the beginning we always, like you say, we have these preconceived ideas. So we have this notion that it's going to take X amount of time. We only give it, let's say we only give it 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever. And because we give it that, and we figure, okay, well, we started today, and you can take it back to being in school even. Like when you were a kid in school and you started the first day of school, you started a lesson, and every day just progressed. There was, you went so far, then you reviewed, and then you moved on and did something else. So there's lots of things that you do in your life where you have that linear progression, right? And you can take that and have that thought process going on. So you're, like you say, the worst part is those preconceived ideas of linear progress.
And then we tend to, when we have those preconceived ideas, then we get in our head the minute that any type of failure or bump or bruise or struggle comes up. And because of that, then we end up, specifically if we don't have somebody who's able to help us pull out and explain to us that, we're not perfect humans, we're not meant to be superhuman, that your failures are not necessarily failures, they could be perceived as wins or learning curves at the very least. And we tend to then stay down the rabbit hole, and then that will completely disrupt consistency. When you end up down the rabbit hole so far that you are immersed in self-hate or self-destruction, or just completely berating and judging yourself, most often that will completely interrupt consistency, because you're only still newer, and your immediate thought process is, why do I even bother? This is not for me. I can't. And if we reframe some of those things, instead of saying this is not for me, how can I make this for me? Or instead of saying something like I can't, you could say something like, but how can I? And because the truth of the matter is, there are certain people who have more of a fixed mindset and more of a growth mindset. But anybody who has more of a fixed mindset, that doesn't mean that you can't overcome that and become more of a growth mindset.
Right.
You just need to be taught, and you need to have that practice. So by simply starting to work to reframe some of your language, that can actually help propel you into more of a growth mindset than a fixed mindset. That doesn't mean that you may not maybe even ever get to a point where you are extremely growth oriented, but you can get to a point where not every single bump or struggle or mishap pulls you down the rabbit hole and keeps you stuck and keeps you inconsistent.
Right. Because you got to look at it from the perspective that when you start your journey, you know that you want change of some sort. So, for example, in what we deal with is fat loss. So you know that somebody's end goal is fat loss. And you can have somebody that says, well, yeah, okay, I want fat loss, but I don't like doing this, I don't like doing that, I don't like these types of exercises, and all those sorts of things. And they put those barriers in front of themselves right away, instead of seeing that those are the barriers that prevent them from getting there in the first place. So going on what you said is, having those realizations that, so I don't like Bulgarian split squats, for example. I don't like push-ups. I don't like this. I don't like that. So I'm always replacing them with different exercises. But I think a simple way to look at that is, well, why didn't you like the Bulgarian split squat in the first place? And if you want to look at it from my perspective, I hated doing them because I had no balance. You put your foot on the bench and you're balancing on one foot and you're trying to do the exercise and you're falling all over the place. And that's sort of like, no, fuck it, it's not for me. I'm not ever doing them. To going, okay, so they're part of our program, so I've got to do them. So what can I do better? So you suggested that I use the treadmill to stabilize myself so that I can get the movements, and then progress into doing it without that, so on and so on. So it's basically going back to what you're saying, is how to reframe it so that it is something that you can do.
Right. It's something you can achieve at the end of the day.
Right.
Rather than just
saying
is,
fuck it, because really that's not an option, especially if you want change.
The other thing is that self-belief and how you feel about yourself also plays a huge role in how you show up. So if you don't feel like you can be successful, you're going to be constantly telling yourself the minute that any bump or struggle or anything comes up that you can't do it, that it's not possible for you. I knew I couldn't do this.
Yeah.
And that could come from all the other types of diets and different things that you did where you did them for an extended period of time, but then you quit and everything went away after that. And that's where the difference comes in between lifestyle and a diet. When you go into a lifestyle, the goal is to never have to quit it. So you need to be able to not only be open-minded to the fact that there's no end date, but you also need to be open-minded that the only way to create a lifestyle is through tweaks and different strategies as you go. So complete trial and error and being willing to practice. And if you're not willing to practice, then you're still always going to come up against those walls and barriers that force you to go, okay, well, I don't know how to navigate this. And since I don't know how to navigate this, now I'm going to quit. And again, if you want to create an actual lifestyle, every single time you come upon something, you have to look at it as, okay, this bump is here. What am I going to do about it? Well, how am I going to overcome it? And yeah, it might take weeks, it might take months, but I need to look at it from a perspective of, I can overcome this, and how am I going to do it? As opposed to, this is what always happens, or this is just how it goes for me, or it's too hard and I always quit here, or whatever it might be that comes out of your mouth or comes into your head. That's how you have to look at things. And that doesn't mean that you have to believe in yourself, because most often when we start, we actually don't believe that we can be successful. We have high hopes and we have extreme motivation and everything else that we can be, and that's all at a high level. But as we go through the journey, those kind of hopes and things start to dwindle little bit by little bit. That's why you can't rely on motivation and things to keep you moving forward. And because of that, it's this, okay, you almost have to accept that I don't believe in myself 100%, but I'm going to show up and continuously show up and put in the practices that I'm being coached or whatever, so that the self-belief comes over time. Because the truth of the matter is, we aren't born with self-belief and self-confidence and self-trust and all of those things. Those things come from practiced practices. Can I say that? Yeah. Practices. So, as an example, some of the things that I teach my clients are to set really, really small, measurable goals week to week or day to day, even if you want it. And that might be as simple as, say, I'm going to drink X amount of water today, or I'm going to get X amount of steps, or I'm going to have a fruit or a vegetable with all of my meals today. And something as small as that doesn't necessarily seem like a big deal, but if you show up for the things that you say you're going to show up for day in and day out as you make your goals, or week after week as you make your goals, that then builds on your self-belief and your self-confidence, so that at the end of every week, when you report to your coach or you report to yourself, you can look at your goals that you set and how well you did with them. And if you're doing really well and you're showing up for the things you said you did, even if it's not perfect, now you're starting to build some self-belief, self-confidence, and self-discipline too, and self-trust. And that's ultimately when you build a lifestyle and when you're aiming to build something that you don't ever quit, those are the 4 things you're aiming to build. Because when you build those things, you'll get to a point where you understand and realize that where you are is a result of the habits, behaviors, and mindsets you've created. And now, technically, you've practiced it so much that you can't quit it because it's a natural part of who you are. That's where when you start something, and especially if you're being coached through it, that is the ultimate goal.
So I got a question. So when people start a journey and they get so far, and it becomes their pattern where it gets a little bit difficult, so they quit.
Mm-hmm.
So is it their negative self-talk that creates the pattern, or does the pattern create the negative self-talk?
I think the pattern creates the negative self-talk most often.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because just think of it this way. I've had numerous people either not join my program or join my program and tell me this later, or tell me this in the initial conversation I had. I've done so many diets, and every single diet I've failed at. And so when you start the original diet, you've never done a diet before, and you start the original diet, you have no expectation of what it's going to be or what's going to happen. You know what you want to have achieved, but you don't go into it thinking, you go into it with hopes and motivation still, but you don't necessarily go into it thinking, I can't do this, I'm going to fuck it up, why bother, yada, yada. That comes after you've done 10 diets or 8 diets, and you've failed and had the same pattern with each one. And again, I'm only just saying this based on my experience, not necessarily that that's the way it goes, but that's the way I believe it goes. That the pattern is what creates the negative self-talk. Because after doing something so many times repeatedly and having the same end result, how can you not feel like everything else is going to be this way?
Okay, so our patterns then develop consciously or unconsciously?
I would say they're developed unconsciously.
Right.
I don't think people go and determine that, or say to themselves every time that they're going to fail, or say to themselves that, because when I point out somebody's pattern, a client's pattern that I see, the client normally doesn't see it.
Right.
So that tells me that it's an unconscious thing.
Right.
They don't see it because they're in it. They're
Okay.
inside the box. I'm outside the box. I can see it. And then we have to work on how we're going to bust down this wall.
Right. So then the negative self-talk then is just kind of their way of justifying it. It's putting the pattern into context. Would that be a proper way of saying that?
It can be, but I also think that it's their way of justifying it. Yes, it's their way. But what we have to realize is that there's a pattern there, but the person doesn't necessarily want to stay stuck in it. The person wants to overcome it.
Right.
But what I think the person hasn't accepted is how much hard work there is to overcome it.
Right.
So how much effort is involved up here to overcome something like that. And so I'll give you an example without saying any names. So last night I had a conversation with a client who continues to set promises, but she doesn't keep them week after week.
Right.
Okay? And so in that conversation with her, I said, this is your pattern. I've seen this pattern. And it's likely come from years and years of diets that you've done. And at some point on a journey, whether it's you who decides or the diet ends, the pattern is that you quit. So because the pattern exists that you quit, now we have to set a new pattern. But I can only give you the tools and the guidelines. It's up to you. And the tools, the guidance, the affirmations, here's how we need to reframe this when it comes in your head. Here's what we're going to do in your environment to set this up so you see it right away and you go do it, as an example. And then we have to play with things and trial and error our way through things so that the pattern breaks. But just because you say overcome that pattern one day, that doesn't mean you're going to do it all the time.
Yeah,
it's still a work in progress.
Right.
And this is also where I think people get stuck, is that they think because they've overcome it once, oh, good, now I'm through this. But that's not how it works. You still have to put the practice in motion. And it also, anything new and any new behavior that you're trying to create that's not your comfort zone requires a ton of mental energy. It requires a ton of mental energy to show up, to talk yourself through it, to, all of those things. And because of that, And the same thing, then you're fighting with the internal voice in your head that tells you this is what you always do. This is not for you. Why am I even bothering? All of those things. You're fighting that to
Right.
show up for the thing that you know you want to show up for.
Right. This might sound obvious, but do you find that people of a fixed mindset have more patterns than people with growth mindset?
Absolutely. So I don't know if everybody knows the difference between a fixed and a growth mindset. So a growth mindset is, okay, I'm struggling with this, but I know I can overcome it. How am I going to overcome it? Let's dig deep, kind of thing. I know I can change, basically. A fixed mindset is, I'm fixed in this. This is just who I am. This is how I behave. This is how I act. This is what I do, and I don't have the power to change it. So those are extreme, obviously.
Right.
You can be a combination of both mindsets, and that's okay. And it's okay to be either or. But the problem with a fixed mindset.
Is it though? You didn't let me be.
No, wait, I'm not finished.
Either
The
or.
problem with a fixed mindset is if you want to change, you can't be fixed. You can't change if you're a fixed mindset.
Yeah.
It's impossible to change if you're not willing to dig into discomfort. It's impossible to change if you are not willing to say, okay, maybe I don't believe I can change yet, but I got to show up for it, otherwise I can't change. Change doesn't happen without change, and change doesn't happen without challenge. So if you're a very, very fixed mindset, the first step is acknowledging that you understand that you're a fixed mindset. That you understand this is where you spend the majority of your time. And because you know you spend most of your time here, now that you've acknowledged it and you have that self-awareness that that's how you act, now you can start reframing your language to help you be able to show up, not necessarily on the other end of the spectrum, but maybe somewhere in between. And you edge your way up the line of fixed versus growth. Not necessarily even until you get to 100% growth, because I don't think anybody is necessarily 100% growth, especially not all the time. But maybe you'll get to somewhere in the middle. And that somewhere in the middle is going to be way more positive on you than being 100% fixed. Or being I don't know if everybody's 100% fixed either. I've never seen the data. But you can be more fixed than growth and more growth than fixed. I'm very much more growth than fixed, but I haven't always been. I've trained myself to be more growth than fixed. Kevin was way more fixed than growth, but now Kevin is more growth than fixed.
Well, 60-40. Wow.
And
Who knew?
as a coach, when I go through things with my clients, I can automatically tell, which is obvious, I guess, I can automatically tell when they're more stuck in a fixed mindset versus when they're more open-minded to, not necessarily growth mindset, but when they're more open-minded to, okay, here's what I have to do to change. People in a fixed mindset don't necessarily take feedback and implement it. They take feedback and then they go, oh, I don't know how to do this, or I can't do this, or whatever.
Do they take feedback more as criticism?
No, I don't necessarily think it's always taken as criticism. I think it's taken as, okay, but there's no necessary implementation because they don't, because they are so stuck in, that's the word I'm looking for. I don't want to say lack of belief in change, because most of us who go into change don't necessarily believe it and aren't 100% in, in self-belief.
I think it's fear of change, because
maybe that's what it is. They're so stuck in the fears and in the if I take this step, what if I don't succeed? That kind of mindset, I think.
Yeah. And
because of that, it's like, okay, well, I may as well do nothing, because then I haven't proven to myself that I've tried to take another step and also failed, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Right. So I guess what I like to challenge all of my clients, and I think I do this as like a homework in the 6 week. I think I do. I can't remember now, but I think I do. Where I have all of my clients for a week really pay attention to how they talk to themselves. Like, really become aware of the things that you say to yourself. Are you speaking to yourself like you would somebody you love, for instance? Or if I were to ask you to list all the things that you love, how long would it be before you said yourself? Like, all of these things matter. So, and I will pick out often with clients in their check-ins or whatever, or somebody will message me and I'll say, but if I read this back to you, you would point out to me that this is not a very positive way to look at this, or this is not even a very neutral way to look at this. You're saying you can't. You're saying that you'll try. And when we say things like, "Okay, Melissa, I'll try," as an instance when like I give check-in feedback, somebody might reply, "Okay, I'll try this," and I will always reply with, "Are you going to try it, or are you actually going to do it?" Because trying also gives you the opportunity to say, "I tried it, but I didn't do it." It gives you the out. It gives you the opportunity to say, "I'm just going to try," which means you have a choice to do or not to do.
Yeah.
Whereas "I will do it" is I'm going to do it.
Yeah,
I'm going
but
to try.
it's not also just whether they will or won't do it. It's how much effort are they willing to give doing it.
Right.
That's fine that they do it, but if they only do it half-heartedly and said, "Well, I tried it," they dabbled their feet in it. They stuck their toes in the water, or feet in the water, or whatever, but they didn't jump in. You know what I mean?
So, which also is another good point, because I think that a lot of people don't recognize that they go into a goal, they want change, and maybe they haven't recognized, and which is common, how hard it is to actually make a change, like a lasting, sustainable change. And so when it gets to the point where it's hard, oftentimes people will have one foot in, but one foot out. It's almost like they're preparing to decide whether or not they're going to quit, or whether or not they're going to work harder or
Right.
put in more effort.
Right.
And when we say work harder, we don't necessarily mean, or we don't mean actually, that you're going to add on more workouts or that you're going to add more to your plate. But the amount of effort required to change is actually, the majority of it is up here. So when I say work harder, I guess what I'm really saying is, could I be more consistent? Could I give a bigger percentage of effort throughout my day? Could I be more mindful of how I talk to myself and really practice reframing it, as opposed to saying I can't, or I don't know how, or I'm frozen, or all of these things. And instead of fighting the simple, because that's the other thing that we do, we tend to tell ourselves that this is too simple and it can't be working, and then we want to add on more things to make it harder. But the harder we make something, the less likely it is to ever be consistent. The less likely you are to ever be consistent with it. So embrace the simplicity and allow yourself to get really, really fucking consistent with the small stuff.
Yeah.
And the small stuff, repeated over and over and over, is enough to get you to your goal if your effort level is high enough to get you there with the small thing. I don't know if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. If your percentage of effort is high, the small things don't need to change. They shouldn't change, actually.
Yeah.
You should just get better at showing up for them. Your consistency should be better.
I really like what you said earlier about, your negative self-talk, how you talk to yourself, and would you talk to someone else like that? And we watched a podcast a little while ago, and it was about a individual who had, but he had extreme negative self-talk. He was basically a perfectionist. And he was so critical, like he would, anything that he would do, he was so super critical of, if what he made was like a little off level, or a little crooked, or the cut was crooked, or, if you hung a picture and it wasn't done perfectly. The way he would talk to himself was so berating, so belittling, like he would literally yell and scream at himself. He said he becomes so good at drywall because he would get so angry with himself, he would punch holes in the wall. He literally put his whole head through the wall, and it got to the point where his family couldn't deal with him, couldn't live with him. He became alienated and ostracized from his own family because he got so angry, and his negative self-talk was so violent. And that's what he said. His negative self-talk was so violent. And it was negative self-talk that he harbored since he was 4 years old. Like, he knew it right from childhood. And when he was, I think, 46 or 47 years old, after his family basically ostracized him, he realized, in order for me to continue on with life, I need therapy. And the individual went to therapy. And one of the first things that his therapist talked about, okay, well, you work at a job. If somebody that you're working with, side by each, makes a mistake, do you talk to that individual the same way you talk to yourself? You know, would you criticize that individual and say the things to that individual that you say to yourself? And he said, well, absolutely not. And so he taught him to understand, well, if you wouldn't say that to that person, why would you say it to yourself? So what he had done in the end was the therapist told him, don't treat that as your mistake. Treat that as so-and-so's mistake and talk to so-and-so that made the mistake, which is like basically talking to your imaginary friend kind of thing. And just the way that they done it, he was in 4 months, from 46 or 48 years of doing it, he was cured within 4 months of just reframing his thought process, reframing his language, and understanding how to talk to himself as opposed to what he was doing in the first place. And so it can be done, and there's lots of ways, and sometimes it may require therapy.
Well, and the other thing is that the saying goes is talk to yourself like you would talk to your best friend. So we often slough that off as, you know, I'm not doing that foolishness kind of thing. But the truth of the matter is that if you don't work on reframing your language, your ability to show up for yourself is going to be hindered as well. And because it's going to be hindered, you're going to continuously be further from your goals than you want to be. If you don't practice reframing things, and if you don't practice on even being aware of your language is more beneficial than ignoring it, basically.
Well, you gotta stop and think about, well, what's the purpose? What are you achieving by talking to yourself that way?
And I think that if you do that, and this is how I've done it a lot of times, is I'll say, Melissa, how is this serving you? Or how is this going to make anything better? Or something like that. And then I'm able to kind of step back, and while still the language that I use might not be, ooh, we got this kind of thing, but it'll be better than it was previously. It'll be, okay, Melissa, head down maybe and just do what you got to do and get it done and see how it works out, or something like that. But it won't be, maybe not be super positive, but it'll still propel me forward.
Right. And then when you do that, there is a noticeable or measurable amount of improvement in what you do.
Exactly.
And once you see that, that's encouraging. That builds self-trust, self-love. That starts to give you the confidence to reframe your language.
Exactly. Self-confidence is a practice, or self-belief is a practice that's built through accomplishment. It's through the little small things that allow you to feel accomplished, the littlest things, and being mindful of those little things and how they make you feel. It feels way better to set a promise and show up for it and pat yourself on the back because you showed up than it does to consistently make promises to yourself that you never show up for. And then at the end of every week or at the end of every day, you're like, oh, fuck, I didn't do this again. And I said I was going to, and what the fuck is wrong with me, and whatever other language we want to use.
Right.
So setting a promise is a starting point, but the promises need to be realistic. And when you make those promises realistic, and you actually do the work because they've been realistic and they're so small, that's where the sense of accomplishment comes from. Right. And then when you feel accomplished, you're way more likely to have a boost, to want to actually add on more, or to do it again and to repeatedly do it.
Right.
And eventually add on more to your goal list or your task list.
That's a very good point. Eventually add more.
That's right.
Like, you can't go from, ooh, I hit all my water targets this week, so now I'm going to go and I'm going to be in the gym 4 days or 5 days a week, and you're only usually in there twice.
Right. That's right. You don't need to.
Exactly. Like you said, you're going to be very realistic, very careful, because, again, if you set your goals too lofty and you don't quite make them, then that negative self-talk and everything creeps back in, and you...
Right. And there's no point. We don't need to go from 0 to 100, because at the end of the day, there's no deadline. There's no end date when it comes to a lifestyle. We can go from 0 to 10, and from 10 to 20, and from 20 to 30, and mosey up till you get to 100. And that still doesn't allow you to end. But when you get to 100, if you've done it in small increments like that, when you get to 100, the habits and the behaviors and the mindsets that help you maintain and sustain it will be embedded in who you are, and then it won't require as much mental focus.
Right.
That's the point of it. The point of it is to incrementally increase and improve your sense of accomplishment, which builds on your sense of self-belief, which builds on your sense of self-confidence, to eventually get to a point where the habits and behaviors and mindsets are somewhat, or if not natural to who you are, which then enables self-trust. You can trust yourself because, wow, I done all this and I did all this and I've achieved all this and I showed up for myself and I was, capable, and look at how I talk to myself now and I feel so much better. But one thing that I do want to point out before we end this is that I'll use myself as an example. So I am very much a growth mindset person. I'm very much, and Kevin will also agree with me, when I set my mind to something, I'm going to do it. I'm going to achieve it, and it's going to be fucking hard as hell. I know this, but I'm going to achieve it. And what I also do, though, want to remind people is that even people who have a very, very full growth mindset and who have that, like, I don't know what the word is, persistence or resilience, they don't not get in their own head. They don't not have negative days. They don't not, I'm not saying that right. They do not. Yeah, they do not. They still have a negative voice. They are still not always positive and bubbly and inspirational and full of gratitude and all of that all of the time. So if you are somebody like me, it's normal as well to have days where you don't feel great and where you're talking to yourself not great and where your performance and your body and your mind all feel bleh. And if you're not somebody like me and you're more of the other end of the spectrum, when you do start to develop more growth mindset, give yourself still, though, the knowledge, or make sure you understand that you're still, even when you improve and develop more fixed mindset where you can change and you have these abilities and you're capable, you still can sometimes end up down the rabbit hole. It's just that you don't stay down the rabbit hole nearly as long as you would have because you have the tools to pull yourself out quicker.
So I've just seen, not like Jesse, but I've seen Twinsies comments.
I know, Sally. Hey, Sally. Yes.
Team Chevy.
I promise we didn't get up and go, oh, we should wear this together to the same colors today. We did not.
Well, we do not because somebody usually doesn't. And
we don't because Kevin always goes, no, Melissa, I'm not wearing the same colors as you or the same sweater as you or something. Anyway, I think that's it, eh?
I think so. I mean, we've covered all the points that we wanted to talk about. Basically highlighting negative self-talk, highlighting all the pitfalls and things of, going down that path, how to get yourself out of that path, the different methodologies behind it.
At the end of the day, I guess the thing we'll end with is that your language does matter. So I will challenge all of you to pay attention to it. Even if you don't work on reframing it right away, being aware of it is super important and super beneficial. And that it does play a role in how well you show up for yourself, and which we've already talked about, and in how consistent you stay. So keep that in mind as you're going through your journey, regardless of what it is you're trying to change. We talk about fat loss here or sustainable lifestyle change simply because that's what we do. Yeah. But in regards to anything, it still applies. Anything at all that you're trying to change in your life, your language and how you speak to yourself matters an extreme amount.
Right.
Is that it?
Yeah. In the beginning, though, that you did forget one thing.
Which is?
Well, you said the website was wide. You never said what it was.
It's fitgirlsrock.net. In case you want to go have a boo. If you subscribe, there's a free booklet, but I can't remember what the booklet is. But there's a booklet there. I think it's about developing habits, tips on developing habits, or something like that. But anyway, if you go to the website fitgirlsrock.net, you can subscribe and you'll get that free book, and then you can have a look around. And we love to hear your feedback. But I will post it in the group as well tomorrow.
Yeah, and if you're not in the free group, free community,
everybody is in the free community. It's taking place in the free community.
No, but if somebody shares it or whatever.
Oh. They can't share from the free community. But anyway, go on.
Oh.
No, because the free community is private. It's not public. Unless you're a member.
Okay, if they want to verbally tell somebody.
Well, they can still share it. They can still share the website if they want, but go on.
That's what I'm saying. There is a link on the website to get access to the free community.
Oh, yes. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can invite your friends or whatever, or anybody who you think would benefit from the free community to the free community anyway at any time if you wanted. Yes. You don't have to ask permission for that.
Nope.
The free community is here for anybody, women, for any woman who
I boot men out. Trust me.
for any woman who would benefit from, a positive group, or just any of the tips or tricks that we share, any of the things that we talk about, feel free. You don't have to be a client to be a member. And yeah. Anyway, have a super great day, and we will see you again next week, same time, same place. But before we go, if you have any topics you would like us to cover, we came up with this one on our own today because it's been something that's been kind of going on. But if you have any topics you want us to cover, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask us, if you don't want to post it publicly in the group, and you can message me privately. But we are always looking for ideas. So if you have any, feel free to let us know.
And before we go, does anybody have any questions about what we talked about today?
Good one.
Huh?
Good.
Yeah. If we've got time, so feel free to ask questions.
I think we went through all of the comments, didn't we, as we were going? Tracy said, bumps in the road when you least expect it. Absolutely. Always happens when you almost least expect it.
Murphy's Law.
It's one of those things where, and this is not a good mindset to be in either, and this is a mindset that I have not fully overcome yet either, although I try not to get in my head too much about it, and I try to reframe it, which is waiting for the other shoe to drop. When things are going well and when you're kind of in a groove, you're almost like on edge, wondering when this is going to fuck up or what's going to happen. And it's a really hard mindset. For me personally, that's been a really hard mindset to overcome. And as I said, I'm not there yet, but I try my best to reframe it. But there's almost always something that will happen along the way that's an unexpected hurdle. And so reframing. Hey, Beth, I'm glad you made it. But outside of that, if you guys don't have any questions, that's it for us today. As I said, if you have any topics or any comments or discussion topics or questions or anything that you want us to cover, please let us know. We will do our best to accommodate. That's it, eh?
Yeah.
Okay. Have a great week. Bye.